surf, sand, and sea. Rainbows, hula, a tropical paradise. These most isolated islands in the world may actually be all those things, but in truth, there's so much more. Instead of all that, we're going to look inland to see the islands through our happy chocolate lens and find out how chocolate might be part of Hawaii finding its way to a stronger and more independent future. Hawaii's isolation makes the fragility of its food system and environment a model for the world as a whole, and we're going to meet farmers and makers who are part of a growing movement to reinvigorate Hawaii's agriculture and independence, and just maybe recover an awareness of integrating people, land, and sea that's been lost for hundreds of years. I'm Sunita from the Chocolate Garage in Palo Alto, California, and I'm traveling the world looking for happy chocolate. This time we're in Hawaii, which is developing into a real hotspot of creative and dedicated farmers and makers. Cacao and chocolate is a very young industry here in Hawaii, and we will be visiting several different farms and small factories, talking to the folks involved about their vision of what's to come in this incredibly unique, diverse, and vibrant place. Our first stop is the Rippon Farm in Waihole, on the windward side of Oahu. Cacao is a very minor part of this incredibly diverse farm, but is part of a greater whole for this family deeply connected to the land. I sat down to chat with Charlie and Paul Reppun and Mark Noguchi, a local chef who sources produce from them. I wanted to hear from them about growing up in Hawaii, the changing food movement, and the way people feel about farming and farmers here in the islands.
We grew up in a rural environment. The population of Hawaii was quite a bit less than half of what it is today. And our father was the only doctor on the island, and it was, he would get paid in fish and chickens and things like that sometimes.
And we've been farming on this farm since 1976. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. When the state stepped in and bought the valley to defuse the huge land use fight because a developer was going to build thousands of homes in this valley. So when the state said, okay, we're buying the valley, and now we're going to negotiate the terms of the lease, it took us, forever. It took us till 1998, I think, to actually negotiate the terms of the lease. But we didn't care that it took that long, from 76 or so to 98, because we knew we were here. And because everyone who was here was grandfathered in, and if you're living on your farm, you're grandfathered in, so that's to be able to live on your farm is super important.
So, but our attitude is that as long as we take good care of this land, it's ours.
And they have been taking very good care of this land, revitalizing taro patches and growing more than 90 different fruits, plants, and vegetables on this beautiful organic farm.
It's actually a very ancient way of doing things because the Hawaiians had right of usufruct, so their land was not theirs. They didn't have fee simple ownership in it, but the maka'ainana, the people who farmed the land, always stayed with the land. And if they didn't use it, the konehiki would take it away and give it to somebody else to use it. But as long as they used it, it was theirs. So it was a right of use, and which makes sense because the longer you farm a particular piece of land, the more intimate you become with it, and the better you'll be at farming it. So it was a very sensible system.
But their situation is very unique.
The state did a study in the early 80s, kind of for the large plantations, the sugar plantations. They were all going out of business, or moving their operations to other places. And so the landowners were, what should we do with their land? So the recommendation to them was, yes, lease out your land to people to farm, but whatever you do, don't let the farmers live on their land, because what might happen is the same thing that happened in Waihole, which is you had all these farmers living here and they refused to leave. And people living here, a whole community, and they refused to leave. The state told them, don't let people live on their land.
The possibility of getting people back to the land is a critical issue here in Hawaii, considering that at present, the islands import 90% of their food from outside. It can be hard to make a living farming in the modern Hawaiian economy, but if the islands were to be cut off from shipping for just a small time, the results could be extreme. Mark Noguchi, a local chef who buys produce from the Reppuns, talks about his role in the food system and how we all need to accept paying more for food and truly valuing it in new ways.
As chefs, we're really selfish, I think. we call our farmers, we call our purveyors, and we're like, hey, I need this, I need that, I need 2 pounds of this, I need 6 pounds of that, and I need it like yesterday. Where both myself and then our staff, I definitely try to be like and tell them like, whatever you get, like, buy it, mahalo. Of course I ask, like, do you have this or do you have that? But you never demand. You always take it and you mahalo it, and you be grateful that someone busted their ass to provide us with beautiful product. That's the relationship.
Yeah, and I think that kind of, the fact that Gooch kind of initiated a lot of that chef farmer type relationship thing, so that's, as far as the education about food sovereignty and food issues and all of that stuff, that's really important, because that's where people kind of start learning about food, is going to some restaurant, So
how do we inspire people to want to go farming, right? It's like, you can get a degree in IT and make 6 figures and live in your nice house, or you can bust your ass for the rest of your life, maybe make a couple bucks, but feed a nation. You know what I mean? And you're a child, like, how do you wait it out?
Can cacao be part of the solution? Maybe. Cacao in limited amounts can definitely offer options for small farmers if they're creative. For example, the Rippuns make a delicious mixture of nibs and honey that Uncle Charlie calls honey fudge. There were a few trees here when they arrived 40 years ago, and they have since expanded the cacao for projects like this and collaborations with other farmers and chocolate makers. I was lucky when we visited that there was some cacao juice only a day or so off the fermenter, just slightly fermented, refreshing, rich, and totally delicious. This little piece of paradise is a hard place to leave, but we've got a lot more to go see here in Hawaii. We head down to Hilo on the Big Island to meet with Tom Menezes, who has farmed an amazing number of tropical crops over the years and first started working with cacao about 30 years ago when Hershey came to the islands in the 1980s.
I always was interested in cacao, or chocolate. Now, who isn't? There are a few people that not, and it's like, I feel sorry for you, but I got involved with the value added because I was trying to work with several other people to do the manufacturing side, and it never came to fruition, And so my friends are saying, Tom, you should just learn on your own how to go make chocolate. So I would say about 12 years ago, I decided, to try to experiment and make chocolate, and it took me 2 years before, after giving chocolate away to all my friends, they finally said, I think you have something good enough to sell now. So I said, well, good, because now you're going to have to pay for it. If you're just in it for money, do something else. Otherwise, you're going to fail. And farming is that way in general. The lifestyle. It's you're your own boss, you're out there in nature, and you're not going to run around barefoot. The cacao industry has been like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But I think now we're far enough ahead where it's gonna make it, and it'll take a lot of people with the passion to keep it going.
Of all the people working with cacao in Hawaii today, Tom has some of the deepest historical perspective.
So when I first started farming this area, we were basically bananas, and then as I wanted to introduce cacao, we did two different methods of planting intercrop right in the double row of bananas. And then the other field we did where we did single row bananas and in the middle plant a row of cacao. So as you can see, these trees are kind of like in a wild mode. And but you can look at all the pods they produce.
These are super different shaped, right?
Yeah.
These ones are much rounder.
But you can see how nice pods are in these trees. Huh?
Tom also told us a story about his great-grandparents that reminds me why, in some ways, Hawaii feels like home.
Her grandparents, or the great-grandparents, was some Chinese guy from China, came over and married a Hawaiian lady.
Oh, okay.
And the pictures of them, it's really funny because you got this big Hawaiian lady and this little Chinese guy.
One of the amazing things that you can't help but noticing about Hawaii is the incredible diversity and acceptance. No single ethnic group is more than a quarter of the population, and this story of Tom's is such a classic Hawaii tale of blending. Ask most locals here in the islands what their heritage is, and very often the first answer you get is hapa, or mixed. This feels so natural to me, because I'm hapa too, even if that word is new to me. But that feeling of coming from a blend of very different cultures has been part of me from the very beginning. From wet and tropical Hilo, we head up to Maui to visit the early stages of a vertically integrated cacao and chocolate company with a big vision. Above Lahaina, in the relatively dry West Maui Mountains, Maui Kuya Cacao is in the early stages of developing a vertically integrated 50-acre tree-to-bar project. The man making all this happen is Gunars Valkirs, who came to Hawaii after spending his career in biotechnology on the mainland.
The only reason I planted cacao is I'd read somewhere that this was the only place in the United States that you could grow it. Like I just said, oh, you know, I think I want to start a farm.
After spending some time with Hawaii-based cacao consultant Dan O'Doherty, Gunnar started to realize just how deep the rabbit hole is when you're talking about cacao and chocolate in Hawaii.
Because the farm is really never going to be a profitable enterprise. I mean, I'm quite convinced that you can't grow cacao in Hawaii and sell cocoa beans and make a living. How much does it cost me to run 10 acres? And it's basically around $150,000 to $175,000 a year. So if I'm selling pods at $10 a pound, and I'm getting, you know, even a good yield, 1,500 pounds an acre, that's 15,000 pounds, that's $150,000 at full maturity. At 7 years, I'm basically breaking even. And the investment up until that point in time is about $1 million to develop 10 acres. You know, so I put in $1 million, I got to the point where I'm selling cocoa beans for just what it takes me to run the farm. Mm-hmm. The $1 million is never going to be recovered. Mm-hmm. So I became quite convinced, and this is what you know led me to the next step, is I got to invest more money to make this, you know, this work, right? I have to build a factory.
Oh yeah, you're in now.
Yeah, no, I have to build a factory. In Hawaii, it's absolutely the truth, and I you know, one of the things that.
So when did you realize this? So like.
Well, actually, I mean, I already sort of knew it when I was, you know, as I paid the bills every month or every week. I sort of knew it. You know, this is adding up to a lot of money. You know, how am I ever going to recover this? But my real analysis was when I sat down and went through everything and put it, you know, well, how much am I spending on fertilizer? How much am I spending on water? What am I spending on, you know, the land, which is actually next to nothing. The land is not the issue here. Mm-mm. It's the labor and the materials. That's the issue. You know, I pay Joe, that you just saw Joe, he gets paid $20 an hour. That's the price you have to pay to get good people here. I mean, I'm sure I could hire somebody for 12 to 15, but you know, they wouldn't be as good as Joe, and that's fine. I mean, he actually can make a living at that wage.
And this is really the theme we keep finding in Hawaii. Since you can't get away with paying farm workers in Hawaii low wages like you can in other countries of origin, every cacao grower we meet has reiterated this point. To be a successful cacao farmer, you also have to be a chocolate maker, or at least creating value-added products. You can't simply export beans from Hawaii. It's too expensive, and no one is going to pay you what it truly cost you to grow it. So you add the value yourself by turning it into wonderful local chocolate. And in reality, this is what food should really be. Because the only reason cheap chocolate exists is because someone, almost always the farmer, is being exploited. So the islands can act as an illustration for the world as a whole. What if we always had to pay farmers and producers a truly living wage?
I mean, even the countries you're going to, I think your video on Nicaragua is about value added and keeping the product there. Right. Right? Right. So you got to encourage that everywhere, not just in Hawaii, but in the places that are growing in the less developed countries of the world.
We've already seen the power of this model in places like Nicaragua and Cuba, but it's also important to acknowledge how hard it still is for average cacao growers around the world to access the full value of chocolate. My Happy Chocolate travels have shown both the promise of these new models and also the difficulty of getting there. Our next stop is on Oahu, over to the lush windward side to visit with Manoa Chocolate in Kailua.
So here we are at Manoa Chocolate in Kailua with Tamara and Dylan, who we'll be chatting with later. And Tamara's going to lead us on a little customer experience, what customers experience when they come in and get educated on craft chocolate.
So our style of chocolate is single origin dark chocolate. So what we do is we curate a collection of beans from around the world, and then our customers can taste by region. And so they can have that experience and learn how Hawaiian chocolate tastes different from, say, Papua New Guinea or Ecuador or Madagascar.
Early stages were really fun and stress-free. There was no overhead, I wasn't paying anyone. Everything I made, I didn't have to spend that much money, and I would just give all the chocolate away. And I'd say, what do you think? What do you like? And I was just all being made in my parents' kitchen.
Then Dylan takes us around their processing plant and describes their very bootstrap beginnings, jerry-rigging a winnower from a kid's bike.
When we got going in 2010, we had to figure out how to build our own piece of equipment because there wasn't anything affordable out there. So just like everyone else, we were watching YouTube videos, and we borrowed a lot from coffee. And so instead of spending $1,000, we went out to Walgreens and we bought a $30 back massager and some duct tape. And so when I turn this on, I can control how fast the roasted beans are sliding down this tray. And so the point of all of this is to remove the shell, which is a very light, thin, fibrous husk, and it's not bad for us, but it doesn't break into chocolate.
Dylan talks about starting a chocolate factory and the difficulties of doing business as a really small company.
Yeah, the first few years that I'd started, it felt like it was like Navy SEALs training for business and chocolate making, because no one wants to work with you when you're small and you're only buying, can I buy 1,000 of those or 500 of those? And they're like, eh. And then the other thing is when you retail a chocolate bar, you have that money right away to make more chocolate. When you wholesale it, you're getting way smaller margins, which makes it really hard to grow.
So Dylan's focus as a maker comes from a passion for chocolate, but the realities of doing this work in Hawaii force a very pragmatic economic awareness, especially when it comes to labor, both in the factory and on the farm.
If it's growing right off the trunk of the tree or the branch, and it takes an extra couple seconds every pod, things stop working. It just takes too long, or you're going to damage the pod or the seed inside or the tree. So we're going to look at this differently than anywhere else in the world because we're constrained by labor.
Finding creative solutions in these areas will certainly be critical as Manoa grows. It'll be great to come back in the next few years and see how the little town of Kailua continues to contribute to the world of craft chocolate.
I want to go back to my little grass shack back in Kealakekua, Hawaii.
Now let's take a drive up to the north shore of Oahu to meet another farmer, Ward Kashiwa, who works with Seneca Klassen, founder of Hana Chocolate, as well as with Dan O'Doherty on many local consulting projects. Ward has been heavily involved in farm establishment for the past couple of years and has lots to tell me about the nitty-gritty work of farming cacao.
You know, it's a tree crop, so pruning the trees so that they have an optimal architecture, not just aesthetically, but it makes a big difference in how the fruit forms on the tree and how they're harvested. So it is very physical. Even just establishing a farm, although we have the advantages of having a tractor and vehicles, you're still farming and you get your hands in the dirt. And then just the whole process of harvesting is very labor intensive. It's all hand-picked. It does not exist mechanical harvesting, so it's manual labor. So you're talking about removing, in a productive orchard, you might be removing maybe 8,000 pounds of pods per year from an acre. The easy way to think about it is a pod, you'll get 1/4 of its weight in dry seed, typically. And then you'll get 35% of the seed weight, wet seed weight, in dry seed after fermenting and drying.
So when you say, a quarter, you mean if you take the pod, you're going to get 1/4 of that weight as wet seed, and then you're going to further reduce that by 70%, or 70. You're going to end up with 35% reduction further?
Yes.
So it ends up being like, I'm not so good at math, like 15%, 20%? Like
5% of 25%.
We see how true this is everywhere we travel in the cacao growing world. It's a lot of work for a little bit of yield. Thus the reason to own as much added value as possible.
Value and increasing value of Hawaiian grown chocolate has really reached a point where it makes financial sense to farm cacao. And that's a really practical bit of convincing that I needed. But it's been a really rewarding and fun journey. Who doesn't want to be associated with chocolate, right?
We now get to meet with the founder of Hana, Seneca Klassen, who's been developing his tree-to-bar chocolate company in Hawaii since 2009. He talks about how he got interested in chocolate and the ethos behind his business.
I didn't have like a bigger agenda.
I just thought, I wonder if there's a way to make a microscopic version of reality that's alternate, that treats everyone fairly and is totally transparent and ethical and still makes really, really good things. Most of us have grown up with such a profound disconnection from the realities of agriculture or farming or food production in general that I think that's actually very dangerous as a society, to have such a gap between what we eat and how that stuff is created. It creates dangerous results that are unhealthy for us, like spiritually, physically, in lots of different ways. If you look at cacao growing in Hawaii, what you're looking at is an honest cost of what it really takes to produce this crop. You got to pay people properly, you have to take care of them, you have to honor their labor and their time and their effort. The commodity price is a joke. Like, the commodity price is a poverty wage. It's not even a poverty wage, it's an absolutely sub-poverty wage. I mean, the system globally for cacao production is designed to keep growers barely alive. That's literally the desire of the system. And I don't mean to say that lightly, like, I don't mean that it's a conspiracy or whatever, but the economic system is set up so that the most value can be derived at the manufacturing end and constrained there and not ever passed back to the agricultural producers. That's how it's set up.
We saw both in Cuba and Nicaragua just how destructive it can be when the price of raw materials and finished goods are so radically disconnected. A lot of producers here in Hawaii seem to be actively searching for a better way, connecting value with price, and looking for ways to tie all that back to a profound respect for place.
To show off the kind of cultural aspects that Hawaii has to offer the world about how to live in harmony with things, how to do agriculture with a great respect for the land, to treat it honorably. There's a Hawaiian word that's called pono, which is very common to hear in Hawaii, and it usually is just translated as righteousness, but living pono means living in proper alignment with your environment on some level. I mean, this is the amazing thing about orchards in general, is that when they're healthy and they're treated well and your participation in them is right, they have the capacity to create abundance without creating waste. And that model is like one of those things that I think for Hawaii and the whole world is actually incredibly powerful and necessary. How do we live abundantly but not be wasteful? And that's a really Hawaiian idea.
Abundance without waste sure sounds like something the world could use more of these days. One of the many incredible things about exploring the world through Happy Chocolate is that it often gets me behind the stereotypes and expectations of a place. Is Hawaii full of surf and hula and rainbows and ridiculous beaches? Absolutely. But it is also full of gracious, generous people looking for ways to express real Hawaiian values through their hard work with cacao and chocolate, and learning to see how these isolated islands represent in miniature all the challenges we face as a human community in this changing world. So we bid a fond aloha to Hawaii for now. I know I'll be back soon for sure, keeping up with what's to come in this warm, vibrant, and diverse island home. Thanks for joining me on the Happy Chocolate Path. Don't miss our next episode, when I'll be traveling to Switzerland. I'm going to explore chocolate in the country where my dad was born, and together we'll see what happy chocolate we can find.